Hello BookTube, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth and it's time for my August wrap-up. Now I wasn't going to film this video today, but I realized that I have several library books that are due today and they've been renewed as much as they can and they will not renew anymore, and I've got to get them back to the library today or risk fines. And even though our library bingo challenge ends tomorrow and I am frantically reading my last two books right now in the hopes of finishing, I decided I would just take a few minutes and go ahead and get this filmed. I probably won't take time to edit it today, so you'll see it a couple of days later. But I wanted to go ahead and show you what I read during the month of August so that I can get my library books returned. And at the beginning of August, I participated in the 7 and 7 readathon. So the last 6 books that I read for the 7 and 7 were The Sinister Sweetness of Splendid Academy by Nikki Lofton, and I've already done a full review of this book. I listened to an audiobook of Organizing from the Inside Out by Julie Morgenstern. I also listened to the first book in the Penderwick series, A Summer Tale of 4 Sisters, 2 Rabbits, and a Very Interesting Boy by Jean Birdsall. I read this for a read-along that ACOS is hosting, and I'm going to be continuing with this series, and then I will probably do a series review when I finish the rest of the series. And a couple of short books that I read to finish up the 7 and 7. One was Muppet Sherlock Holmes. This is a graphic novel by Patrick Stork and Amy Meverson. And for nostalgia's sake, I read Good Morning Sunshine by Bill Keane. This is a compilation of Family Circus cartoons. And I read Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. This particular volume has Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which I read for Booktubeathon, and Through the Looking Glass. So now I am happy to say that I have read both of these books for the first time. So those were for the 7 and 7 readathon. So now let me tell you about the print books that I read during the rest of the month. This is what I read for book club: The Girls of Atomic City, The Untold Story of the Women Who Helped Win World War II by Denise Kiernan. I read this a little bit each day throughout most of the month, and I wasn't quite finished by the time book club came around, but I was still able to participate in the discussion because I had read the majority of it, and then I finished it a couple of days later. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot about this time period, about the making of the atomic bomb, and also about the women who were involved in the war effort and what were some of the different jobs that they did. And I thought it was a very interesting read. My father was a soldier in World War II. My mother was a clerk typist. They were not married and had not met at that time. They met and married later after the war. And they didn't really talk a lot about that time frame, but I know that it was a big part of their life. So I was very interested to read this. But I would recommend this if you are interested in what was happening in the United States during World War II. I would definitely recommend picking this up, especially if you are interested in the involvement that women had. Some other print books that I read The One by Kiera Cass, and then Happily Ever After, also by Kiera Cass, which is the short story collection from this series. I thoroughly enjoyed both of these. I really thought that since I knew the outcome of this book that I wouldn't enjoy it as much. But let me tell you, even though you can assume who is going to be the queen in the end, there's so much happening to get there that it's really an interesting story, and it's just, there's so much action and suspense and drama, and I thought it was really a good book. I enjoyed it a lot. As far as the short stories, I think I enjoyed the women's stories a little better than the men's. I really liked Queen Amberly's story, and I thought that the disclaimer was good in the beginning where Kiera Cass points out that she's not advocating abusive relationships. She's just simply trying to portray an honest story, and I like that. I thought that it was very well done, and I was particularly interested in Marley's story because I wanted to understand a little bit more about how she got herself into the predicament that she did. Now Maxon's story I thought didn't really tell us much more than what we could gather from the main novels, and Aspen's story was good. It was good to see a story from his perspective and understand a little bit more about where he was coming from. But Maxon's story I didn't think was really necessary, although if you're going to be writing a story about the main characters, you can't really leave him out. So it was fine that it was there, and it's got a lot of other bonus material too. So from here I will be reading The Heir and The Crown to finish up this series, and my daughter Katie of course has read all of them and has just been insisting that I hurry up and read these already. today so that she can talk about them with me, and it's just been a lot of fun to get these read. Another print book I read is A Caribbean Mystery by Agatha Christie, and my husband is reading that right now for the Library Bingo Challenge. So as soon as I have that back in my hands, I will insert a little section into this video about that book. This is a Miss Marple book. I've only read one other Miss Marple book that I can recall, and I enjoyed both of them. This was enjoyable because I did not figure out who the killer was until right at the end. And the characters are interesting, so it was a good story, but it wasn't really anything that I got really excited about. So, you know, it was just kind of, yeah, you know, it was enjoyable, but it didn't really wow me, I guess, is a good way of putting it. All right, now the rest of these books were predominantly audio, but I do have the print copies of most of them, and I did do a little bit of reading in the print books along with the audio. I am happy to say that I have now read 2 Harry Potter books. The majority of this I listened to on audio, but the very last CD started skipping, and I had just picked up this copy for Katie at our library book sale, so I was able to read the last few chapters out of the print book, and I was glad because I really was not understanding what was happening right at the end on the audiobook. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was great, and I'm looking forward to moving on to Prisoner of Azkaban. Here's another book that I listened to primarily on audio, but I'm really glad I had the print book because I just got really bogged down in it, and the print book kind of helped me to get the full idea of it. This is 1984 by George Orwell. I have wanted to read this ever since I learned about it in 1984. 1984, I was in college, and I had never even heard of this book. I didn't have to read it for school. I didn't really even know it existed, but I remember seeing in the student union signs started popping up, Big Brother is watching, and I remember asking somebody, what does that mean? What is that? And they said, well, you know, it's from the book, 1984. It's 1984. Come on, don't you know anything? And no, I really didn't know what this was about. And I've always been curious about it. So this was a copy that was being discarded from our friends in the library, and I grabbed it and decided that at some point I was going to get it read. So I read it for the Library Bingo Challenge. This meets the criteria to read a banned book. I have to say, though, I didn't particularly enjoy it. I thought it was really wordy, and it just moved really slow. All of this political psychology or psychology of politics is not really anything that interests me. So I was really glad that this book was not any longer than it was. I guess I was expecting it to be a fast-paced dystopian novel like today's dystopian novels, and it really wasn't. It was a slow burn. The one thing I did kind of appreciate, though, was the idea of changing the language and simplifying the language. That's actually not a bad idea. Of course, I would never impugn that on anyone because freedom of speech, I wouldn't want to give that up. But the whole idea of simplifying the English language makes a lot of sense. And so that one point, I was kind of like, So anyway, I'm glad I read it because I've always been curious about it, but it's not anything I will ever read again, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. Another audiobook that I listened to in my car is an abridged version of A Life on the Road by Charles Kuralt. I have listened to another Charles Kuralt audiobook before, and both of them are read by him, which I love. I love to hear his voice. It takes me back to childhood, where I actually used to look forward to watching the news to see if there was going to be a Charles Kuralt segment at the end of the CBS Evening News. They were always wonderful, heartwarming stories, and as a kid, I really appreciated those because, you know, the news can sometimes be kind of scary and not necessarily anything that a kid would want to watch. But I always looked forward to seeing where in the world Charles Kuralt was going to be, and I really thoroughly enjoyed his reports. In fact, I was even wondering if there has ever been any video compilations of his news reports that have been released on DVD or anything. I haven't had a chance to look, but if you know of any, let me know if they are on DVD and can be purchased. I would love to go back and watch some of those reports. They were just really, really wonderful. And if you're too young to remember who Charles Kuralt is, you may remember him from the Sunday morning news program, but before that and during, he would travel around in a motorhome and do human interest stories, and they were just wonderful, and they would usually be the last 5 minutes of the CBS Evening News once or twice a week, and they were just really neat to watch. So while I was editing this video, I realized that I had neglected to talk about Teacher Man by Frank McCourt. This is a book that I listened to in my car. There were definitely parts of it that I enjoyed and parts of it that I didn't care for, mainly because there was some bad language. You know, there were definitely things that I didn't think my kids needed to hear in the car, you know, because he was quoting a lot of things from high school students and things like that. There were some kind of raw parts. The thing I appreciate about this is that I think it's very open, honest, and true to life. He opens up about a lot of things that, you know, maybe you wouldn't be proud of to tell. And I thought it was a very nicely written book. But overall, I thought it was a very open and honest portrayal of what it's like to be a high school teacher. Now, my parents were both teachers, but in a rural area, so I'm sure they faced different challenges than Mr. McCourt did in the urban areas of New York City. I thought it was a very good snapshot of what it's like to be a high school teacher, and I appreciated that. Another audiobook that I listened to is The Hidden Oracle by Riordan. This is the first book in the Trials of Apollo, and I laughed out loud at this. Apollo is an awesome main character, just really great. You know, I loved that Percy Jackson and some of the other characters from the previous two series showed up in this book. One thing I did have to keep reminding myself of was who the narrator was, because the point of view is Apollo, so when he would say me or I automatically think Percy, and I think, no, this is not Percy, this is Apollo. He's just so funny, you know, so self-centered, and he's just a great character. I just thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. So in August, I read 15 books, and here they are. That's all I have for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.